A couple Bionicle things to show off towards the end of this video, but I actually wanted to focus this one on the Technic 2025 sets. I actually recorded this video already, but I wanted to wait until we started getting reviews on some of these because I had a sneaking suspicion about 2025 and the functions specifically. And unfortunately, to toot my own horn, I was actually right about all of what I predicted, but that doesn't make me happy, because I predicted a lack of functions, and that's kind of what I'm seeing. So we're going to start from the bottom. I'm actually not going to pay too much attention to these larger vehicles. There's not a lot I'm going to even try to glean off of sets of this size based on just these pictures alone. However, just as a passing statement very quickly, I'm not a big fan of the motorcycle sets in general. They're fine, like they're just not my thing personally, but if you like them, then I think that this looks good. A little under on the parts, like price per part, not super, but it's whatever. I will say, though, the F1 cars, ignore my water bottle popping, by the way, it just keeps doing that. Anyway, the F1 cars, though, two of them in the same year, in the same wave of Technic. I know that's a thing that like Lego's trying to do for 2025. I don't know why. $230 a piece. I can't imagine that going over well for them. Like, who's going to buy both when you can just buy one? They're going to have basically the same functions. I'd hate to break it to you. But I know people are mostly buying these for display, so maybe Lego will eke out their $460, whatever. Anyway, with that said, though, notably, something else we'll also see as a common theme in this wave is an increased price point on a lot of sets, unfortunately. Starting off with the Corvette Stingray. Now, it is still worth noting that the price per part here is good overall, but traditionally, these sets have been pretty good parts amount, but about $10 cheaper, at least here in the US. So, yeah, they went up $10. It was only a matter of time before they were going to do that. They did it here. I think it's still a good value overall, but, you know, let's move on. That said, though, I am actually kind of a fan of the research sub. Been the first time we've seen a submarine as a main model in Technic since, like, I don't know, the 90s or whatever. No idea specifically how accurate this is to, like, real-life versions of vehicles like this. I've seen vehicles like this, so, like, I recognize it, right? But it is a novel vehicle for Technic specifically. I do like it. Huge fan of the introduction of sand blue for the first time in Technic. Technically, we've seen... I hate using that term. We've seen Technic parts in sand blue before. Notably, there's a 7-length lift arm, but never in as like a primary color, at least not for Technic in like the last 20 years, I should mention. So outside of that, I think it's a good set. I think that the price here is pretty good as well. I think that the function here, admittedly, there's only two functions as far as I can tell. The claw arm, I guess the claw arm opening and closing is a function in and of itself, so 3 functions. The actual mechanism that tucks it away, that kind of folds it away, that's really cool as well. And it acts as a stand for the model, too, which is neat. And then the gear on the back, which I believe turns all of the propellers as well. So the propellers on the sides are able, as far as I know, to rotate, but I don't know if that's like a mechanism or anything like that, or if that's just manual. Anyway. Moving on from there, we have the bush plane. I am definitely nostalgic for this vehicle specifically, if only because one of my very first Technic sets after coming back from school was the fire plane from like, I don't know, 10 years ago at this point. Been forever. Fantastic price per parts ratio back when that came out, and fantastic functions in that set as well. Now, this set, for what it's worth, does have half the parts, so... you know, you're not going to get quite as much functionality out of this set, but I think what you get here is actually pretty good. It's an aesthetically pleasing set. There's basically one function, but it is a push propeller spinning mechanism, plus the pistons on the sides of the model rotate as well, or move as well. But that's all just geared together. It is a push mechanism very similar to the fire plane, which is a very cool function for that set. It's very cool to have it here. Interestingly, it's on the side of the model. I predicted that it was going to be underneath, similar to the other set. Maybe had I taken a closer look, I would have seen it's literally sticking out right there. So, you know, cool nonetheless. For both of the pullback sets, I am a fan of these, though it is worth noting that price point, $8 more expensive than they were previously. That's not technically true. We got that like gnome, whatever the hell that was also this price point, but it did come with significantly more pieces than this as far as I can remember. These are back down to the same amount of parts as the previous Monster Jam sets, but they're $8 more. I still think that they're decent value for what it's worth, especially when it comes to like new recolors and things like that. I don't know what in each of these is specifically recolors, because of course we got that McLaren set in the Keat orange color here as well. So I don't know if, you know, what of this. I didn't check over all those parts is what I'm getting at. Point being though, light gray and Keat orange both fantastic colors to see more of in Technic, specifically for panels for light bluish gray. Moving on though, top row here, center one first. I think it's good. Interesting scale choice for this vehicle, seeing as how we had Dom's Dodge Charger, which was a much larger scale than this. So it's very strange that they're in different scales. Maybe that's for Lego to try to incentivize mockists to sort of reverse the scales of the vehicles. I have to imagine someone's going to build a larger version of this if they haven't already. I have to imagine someone's going to build a smaller version of Dom's Charger to match this scale if they haven't already. So I think it's still a cool nod. Either way, $60, yeah, of course. It is a licensed set in this case. I mean, they're all licensed, but you know what I mean, right? To a movie in this case, a franchise in this case. So I don't know how that affects pricing. $60 though, 800 pieces. A very recognizable vehicle. I think, yeah, okay, that's fine. And orange, good. Yellow, good. Interesting color choices since we have seen them before in this scale as well. But it makes sense for this vehicle. It's, All right. Moving on, though, to the other two vehicles directly connected to it, because I'm not a fan of either of these. $50 for a set of under 500 pieces. Not great in terms of functionality. Also not great. It has two functions. It has a couple of features, but don't let that fool you. Those are not the same thing as functions. Functions, I'm going to be considering something that's like gear driven or geometry driven, right? So in this case, the gear on the top steers the vehicle. The gear on the side tips the bed. Okay, great, but no fake engine as far as I can tell. The doors open, cool, but that's a pretty basic function to add in here. It's nice to have. The tipper door opens with gravity in this case, but none of that is new stuff, and none of that is really worth a price of $50 at this point. It's also worth noting that, yes, while this vehicle is dark blue, that is the color we saw on the Ford GT recently, so I don't think that there's that many even recolors here as well, or new parts. There might be some. I have not dug deep into this model, but yeah, really disappointing. I do like the color. I do like the actual overall vehicle. I think at $40, I'd still be kind of disappointed just because of the lack of functions, but I could at least say the vehicle's worth it, right? 30, 35, I think the vehicle's a good deal at those 2 points. 40 is my top at this, and I would pass it up, but I would understand people buying it. 50 feels too expensive. This one, on the other hand, almost feels too cheap, and I mean that in the worst way. This should have been, in my opinion, $13-ish, if only because that backhoe leaves a hell of a lot to be desired. Specifically, I mean the back bucket, right? I actually like the nod to the classic design here. I think that's just because, they wanted to limit the amount of new parts and just parts in general in the set. 104 pieces for $10 is not, it's fine, it's fine for Technic specifically, but we've seen better deals than that. However, I want you to really pay attention, to the very back of the vehicle. First off, ball joint for this is interesting at the very least. It does mean that you're going to get a little bit of mobility out of this, which is better than just a single axis of rotation, but also it's completely manual. In fact, everything that you see on the backside of the vehicle is manual. In fact, this vehicle has one function. At $9, that's not awful by any means, but this easily could have had steering, articulated steering in the center. The outriggers could have been sort of like a geometric locking outrigger. Lego's done those at this scale. I know that that's not a technical term, but hopefully you get what I'm trying to say there. These outriggers are going to do nothing. They're just on friction pins. This vehicle would tip over. But it's worth noting that the orientation of the socket means that this arm is not actually going to be able to reach out to the sides very far. So it's not actually going to tip over. But in fantasy, in your imagination, those outriggers, they suck. The back bucket, it sucks. It's minimal. It's as minimal as it can be, and that's why I think that Lego should have really pumped in a few more parts, 20, 30 more parts, throw this at that $13 price point, $12.99, whatever, here in the US, and I think it would have been better for it, You could dress it up with a little more panels if you want to do the more modern style, or you can keep the more simplistic, sort of bare, open style that people are nostalgic for. All of that's fine. The front bucket can tilt, but it is just a ratchet joint, so it is entirely manual. The only function in this set is the arm for that bucket, specifically being able to raise and lower, powered by the gear at the top. That is the same exact function on the Polybag coming out this year as well, which is the skid steer loader. The only difference is that it's not rotated 90 degrees. That's it. That's not great, in my opinion. So, yeah, very unfortunate vehicle. Really no notable pieces in this set either, I want to mention. I know that some of these pieces are relatively recent. These panel pieces here on the sides, this panel on the top, not the most common pieces yet, but they do exist in yellow. I don't think there's a single new piece in this set, as far as I can tell. It's not great, man. Yeah, not excited about it. But overall, the reason I wanted to talk about this at all was because of that lack of function. Not even just a lack of function, though. Like the sets that I have seen that have functions that I admire are not novel, with the exception of 2 sets. So I'm going to go ahead and say my favorite, quote unquote, here, in terms of functionality, is probably going to be the bush plane and the sub. I think that the sub in general is a very novel vehicle. It's something we have not seen in a very long time in Technic. A function like this is also fairly unique. The fact that the arm can fold up underneath the vehicle entirely. A lot of great recolors here as well. Sand blue, always welcome. Hopefully we get more sets in that color. You could also bring like dark green, give us a Mini Cooper Lego. That'd be cool. Dark red, give us a whatever the hell car company uses dark red as their signature color. Whatever, you get my point, right? We see dark blue a lot these days. We don't see quite as much, or really any, dark red or dark green. Dark green and botanical, thankfully. Dark red with the Source Dragon that came out recently has like 1 or 2 Technic pieces in that color. That's good. It's not enough. Give us more. And hell, I'd even say brown. You know, we've had brown from Technic Star Wars build specific. Anyway, getting ahead of myself. If you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to subscribe. And of course, as I mentioned, I do want to continue making Bionicle content on the channel. Of course, did want to go ahead and showcase this overall, even though I'm not like entirely impressed by it. I still want to think that at least it's better than the version we got, I think, out of store. Off store shelves. I wanted to do these on the side just to show that like you could do texture on it if you wanted to. They stand out being the only real textured pieces on here, but you know, it works. Mask on the back end, which is just a resin cast version of the Onua Uniter mask, which is why it's solid black. And the function here, which has actually been shrunk down a little bit so the trigger doesn't stick out quite so far, and it's a little bit easier to kind of activate as well. So you hold the model from the top instead of from the back, because I've noticed that when I was trying to use the function with other sets, that my hand would kind of get in the way of grabbing sets. So just having your hand back here means that whatever you're grabbing, it feels more natural. That's just my opinion, though. That's, you know, subject to change, of course. And then the other thing I made, just because I thought it was kind of cute, even though I had no reason to do it, was this little, like, Triceratops ice creature. Why? I don't know. I was just toying around with, honestly, a terrible body build that I made. I don't know why, but I made a custom Matoran body for Generation 2 Bionicle, or I guess CCBS if you want to use it for that as well. And it was awful. Like, I made literally a worse version of the XT4 torso. It was so many pieces. It was bulkier. It was chunkier. Why did I do that? The XT4 torso is fine. It's a good piece. Why did I? And not to mention, it had worse articulation because of the orientation of all the ball joints on it. It was just bad. It was a bad choice. I made a bad choice. All right. I'll see you on the next one. Take care.